What was the biggest waste of money in human history? The Darien Scheme. For those who don't know, it was Scotland's attempt to set up a colony in Panama and link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. About 20% of Scotland's wealth was thrown at it, and it completely failed in just 2 years. The Swedish ship Vasa. The Vasa was built in the 1620 to take advantage of the very newest in warship technology, a second row of guns. It was to be a symbol of Sweden's might, and thus was decorated with beautiful statues and carvings. This ship took 3 years to build and cost roughly 5% of Sweden's GDP. Unfortunately, the effect of a second row of cannons on seaworthiness was poorly understood. With great fanfare, the ship set off, experienced its first breeze, and still within full view of the city of Stockholm, capsized and sank. Got to be that person who bought the first ever tweet as an NFT, purchased for $2.9 million, now worth about $4. I heard a story of a dude who proposed to his girlfriend with an NFT, saying it was an investment and in hopes it would become profitable and he would buy a ring. I have no idea how it ended, but I can guess where it went. Me forgetting to turn off the lights, according to my dad. The CIA putting a microphone into a cat to spy on commies only for the cat to get hit by a car. I think it was like $6 million. And countless years of preparation and training only to be lost under some tires. I would have to say that gym membership I didn't cancel until 8 years after I moved away. For $1 trillion to replace the Taliban, with the Taliban, gotta be up there. Probably that Dutch guy who spent money buying tulips in 1636. $35 billion for the metaverse. The Great Wall of Gorgon, built by the ancient Sasanian Empire in modern-day Iran. The purpose was to protect themselves from nomadic invaders. It was constructed with 100 million man-days of labor, which is equivalent to around 300,000 workers toiling for 5 years straight. Considering the average labor cost, material expenses, and other related expenditures, the total cost of the project could have reached an astronomical sum of approximately $130 billion in today's dollars. Needless to say that it failed its intended purpose, as Huns devised techniques to overcome the wall without much hassle. Can't believe nobody has mentioned World War I. Literally all of the world's most wealthy nations, completely financially ruining themselves, and slaughtering a large proportion of their young men, and all of the historical consequences that followed over essentially nothing, and achieving nothing except for a massive geopolitical regression, with costs which we are arguably still reeling from today. Edit. First bit reads weird, now it's one of the top 10 or so comments. This climbed up from the very bottom. Baby. It also caused World War II. With World War I being the root cause, is probably the most expensive endeavor in all of human history. Exactly, it was essentially one gigantic war with a 20-year recess. I just realized the Cold War pretty much continued on after a 20-year recess. New Zealand spent about $25 million on a flag referendum. Before it started, the public were against it, saying, "We would never change the flag." The government persisted anyway. 2 years later, the public voted to keep our current flag. So we did massive fucking waste of time and money for a result they should have been expecting from the very beginning. Cleveland Browns paying $150 million for Deshaun Watson. So, story time for non-Americans who don't know who Deshaun Watson is and why that number is so awful. The Cleveland Browns have long been one of the worst teams in the NFL. Several years, they finally made it back to the playoffs, thanks to the effort of one Baker Mayfield, another quarterback. However, Browns front office for some dumbass reason didn't want to retain Mayfield, and so decided to spend a $130 or $150 million contract on Deshaun Watson, as well as include several draft picks in the trade. At the time, Watson had been a quarterback for the Houston Texans, and in his prime was seen as a generational talent who could take a good team a Super Bowl. At the same time, allegations of sexual assault were springing up against Watson, totaling 20 women. It doesn't matter if he was the best QB in history, that's awful PR and pissed off the entire NFL fanbase. Still, the Browns paid for him. Cut forward to 2025, and Baker Mayfield was able to make it to the playoffs with his new team Tampa Bay Buccaneers, even though they just lost. And Deshaun Watson has played fucking awful football. He is genuinely one of the worst quarterbacks out there. Had been suspended for 11 games due to the allegations, and taken numerous major injuries since getting signed. His most recent one tearing his ACL, which knocks you out for the season. Before the Watson trade, the Browns were seen as a team people pitied, because it felt like they could never catch a break each and every year. Now, they are a reviled fanbase, and I don't see their reputation ever recovering until every single person involved with that trade is fired and out of the organization. Those guys who bought tickets to the Titanic sub. World War I, a war that nobody really wanted to fight, was supposed to be a short one, and at its end left almost every European country severely indebted or in bankruptcy. Bailing out billion-dollar companies during COVID, like Delta Airlines that charges me $50 to bring a bag on an airplane, instead of, training new doctors or fast-tracking those already in med school, or paying off their student loan debt. Stonehenge? The whole thing was supposed to be 18 inches tall, but the work crew misread the runes. The Vietnam War at $176 billion. Countless dead for no reason, and nothing positive came of it. Quantitative easing, and the banking bailout. We have created a system where businesses can be too big to fail, and they can expect a bailout when they get into trouble. But when times are good, all the profits go to the shareholders. So we have privatized profit and socialized risk. This means we have effectively rigged the game for capitalism, making a system where market forces are no longer fully in play, and creating zombie companies that should have folded a long time ago. Everyone here has better answers, but I have got to mention Twitter. What an absolutely idiotic way to buy a company. Acquire, because someone told you can't. Fire 80% of the staff. Abolish the branding completely. Remove mod support. Offer worthless utilities that used to be free as part of a premium service. Then force push notifications to every single user that are really just your personal tweets. And when people still won't listen to you, masquerade as an anonymous user on your own app, company, artificially inflate your own follower count, and be your own biggest supporter. He bought himself a huge amount of political influence, which he may well leverage for far higher value in his other companies. It's a bit like the barons that bought newspapers to gain influence and control opinions. It's not about the profit margins of what they buy, it's what extras it all gets them. Not the dumbest but a personal favorite of mine, the US military spent hundreds of millions developing the Axiom 29 rifle. It was basically a grenade launcher with some extra bells and whistles. They wanted it to replace the M16 so every grunt would be carrying one. In a shockingly unshocking turn of events, that's a freaking war crime. $300 million later and a single Google search could have prevented it. Think Scotland spent a fuck ton of money for a new welcoming slogan for international travelers. They settled on Welcome to Scotland. I can't believe no one has mentioned the failed siege of Rhodes in 305-304. Long story short, Demetrius, king of Macon, was afraid of Rhodes' naval power and their potential alliance with Egypt. Demetrius decides he is going to attack Rhodes, but to do so, he is going to need massive machines of war. With Alexander the Great's innovations, Demetrius bolstered and scaled them up. This guy was known as the Besieger for his skill in siege warfare. Demetrius invents and has the Helepolis built, a massive rolling tower on wheels. The Helepolis was a great siege tower, 130 feet tall and 65 feet wide. It sat on 8 wheels and casters, so it could be moved forward and back and laterally as well. It had multiple stories connected by sturdy stairs, one for ascending and one for descending. Its sides were iron-plated for fireproofing and had portals that opened when the catapults fired. The Helepolis weighed 160 tons and required hundreds of men to move it, via the capstan and belt drive and thousands more to push it from behind. The Helepolis contained a variety of armaments on each of its 9 floors. 2 180-pound catapults and 1 60-pounder were on the first floor. The catapults were categorized by the weight of the missile it threw. 3 60-pounders were on the second floor, and 2 30-pounders on each floor above that. The top 2 floors contained men armed with bows and dart throwers for killing defenders on the city walls. The tower's ironclad, mechanically adjusted apertures were lined with animal skins, wool and seaweed to make them fireproof. The Helepolis was the largest siege tower of its time. When Demetrius brought the Helepolis to bear, the Rhodians knocked a hole through their own wall under cover of night, where they expected the Helepolis to attack. They then flooded the entire area with water and sewage, so when the massive tower was moved up the next morning it became deeply mired in the mud. Ultimately, the siege failed, and Demetrius left Rhodes, leaving behind all of his siege engines. Years later, the Rhodians sold the remains of those siege engines, including the Helepolis, which earned them enough money to build one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. Thank you for this post. Interesting to read. Panama Canal first attempt. The French didn't understand what they were getting themselves into, and death from mosquitoes killed off too many that the project had to be abandoned. 20 to thousands people died, and a huge part of the French population went bankrupt, after having invested their savings in the company, because the guy behind it had created the Suez Canal, which was a giant success. But the issue is that Panama is full of malaria mosquitoes, and it's impossible to do anything there. Workers died like flies. When USA took over, they were better prepared, as they learned much from the failed attempt. They started a civil war in Colombia to create a new country for the canal, and then covered up any puddle or water container they found. Then sprayed deadly chemicals everywhere. It was the only way to do it. Thanks for watching. Share your story in the comment.